If you click on the video thing, that bar on next to the video thing, like that arrow,
Well,
you
that's
can
fine.
blur your background.
I'll screw it up and you'll lose me.
If you okay, okay, I will start the webinar if you all are ready with it. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kabir, and I'm with Battle Lever Research Group. I will be your host for today's webinar. We got a great lineup for the speaker joining us today. They will be covering livestock emergency preparedness, which is a really important topic for all of us. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank all the counties that support and fund our work. Because of their support, we are able to offer webinars like this and bring valuable information out to our producers. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the presentation, please hold them until the end of each speaker's presentation. We will be having short Q&A session after every presentation. If something urgent comes up or you need my help during the webinar, feel free to drop it in the message in the chat. I will be keeping an eye on it throughout the session. All right, let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day. It's Karen Smith from Alberta Beef Producer. Karen, over to you.
Thanks, Kabir, and thanks to the Battle River Research Group for having me. So I guess I'm here to talk about preparing for the unexpected. I work a lot in the disease space, so some of my presentation is kind of angled that way. But what I really wanted to start with was kind of the circle of emergency management. So we start about thinking about prevention and mitigation. And almost always prevention is cheaper than trying to figure out something during an event. But it's hard to prepare for the unexpected. So the things you need to think about are really awareness, identifying potential threats, and then how do you reduce the impact. Once an event, then you can prepare. So you can plan, you can train, and you can maybe test your plan. If an event happens, that's the response phase where actions are taken to minimize impacts. And then finally, you have the recovery piece, which is where you're trying to get back to normal, or at least as back to normal as possible. And that requires a lot of resources and support. And depending on the emergency, you'll see that those resources and support might differ. So I'm kind of going to talk about all of these phases in a bit more detail with a livestock context. So if we're thinking about awareness and identification of potential threats, we could be thinking about natural disasters, fires, floods. We could be thinking about disease outbreaks. We could be thinking about power utility failures. Drought can be an emergency. Road accidents can also be an emergency, which I think Brett's going to talk about a little bit later. But it can be really hard to wrap your head around the risks, right? Because they're not predictable. And then we have this kind of, and it's just a human nature thing. We have this kind of idea that, oh, it won't happen to me, right? Like sometimes I go out hiking and I don't bring my bear spray, and because I won't see a bear, it won't happen to me, right? Until you do see a bear, and then it's a problem. So I think it's about actually going through what are the most probable things to happen. So when we think about risk, it's really the probability times the impact. So you can actually go through various emergency type scenarios and make kind of a table. This is a really simple version of this, but you could think about, okay, so the probability of this thing happening is low, but maybe the impact is catastrophic. Or the probability is medium, but the impact is kind of negligible on my operation. Or if the probability is high, what does that impact to me? So you can actually go through and kind of rank things in order of their probability of happening to you and what the impact would be to your operation. And then you can sort of prepare for that. So I'm going to walk you through a bit of an example. I'm going to go back through this example a few times. But let's think about an example of very severe drought. Drought is no stranger to anyone of us here in Alberta. But let's say it's a very severe drought. And let's say I'm in an area that has already been very dry for several years, right? So the probability of it being dry again is probably at least medium. But the impact of my operation is severe because I've already been so dry. So that's just an example of how you can kind of rank different situations. But there's a lot of what ifs you can go through, right? And this can be really overwhelming. You can what if over here and what if over here and what if over here. And my suggestion would be stick to the obvious, right? So if we're thinking about drought, what's a destocking plan? If we're thinking about fire, what's a potential evacuation plan? If we're thinking about a power outage, what is the backup for that? What is our backup plan or generators, right? If it's disease, your backup plan is probably prevention in terms of biosecurity and record keeping, to be quite honest. And so don't get caught up in all the little nuances of what could happen. Stick to the most obvious big thing would be my advice there. And then think about contact lists in the preparation phase. So your contacts, your neighbors, employees, your veterinarian, maybe poison control, transportation resources, and of course the county plays a big part. Another part of preparing is planning. And if you have a failure to plan, if you plan, you will plan to fail. So think about what you can do on your operation to actually plan for these types of things. So the example on the screen here is just a farm map, right? And think about your premise ID. If you haven't updated your premise ID in some time, you can go online and do it or call 310 Farm, get that done, because it's actually a system that the province can use to alert you of emergencies. They used it in the fire in Grand Prairie, and we can use it in disease situations as well. And so, like I said, this picture is a farm map, right? So you can use Google Earth, you can hand draw it. I know of people that have kind of laminated it and rolled it up in a piece of PVC pipe and put it at the farm gate, or another easy location to find for first responders. Keep an up-to-date livestock inventory, and if you have individual ID numbers, that can come in very handy when it comes to tracking down livestock after or in a disease situation. Think about your yearly production cycle and particularly vulnerable times of year. And this might lead you to trigger points, right? So if we go back again to that drought example, what are the trigger points and when do they activate? Is it in May when I still have not had any rainfall since my snow melted in early March here? Or is it my forage production is way below what it should be in June and July? What are those trigger points throughout your production year and where you're particularly vulnerable? And then you think about the mitigation plans for that, right? So if we have our particularly vulnerable times of year, those are our trigger points. We know when they activate. Then you can think about the plans that support that when those triggers are hit. In preparation, you always get told to build emergency kits. I don't know that many people have them as part of their day-to-day. I mean, I certainly don't. I probably should. Both for people and livestock, right? So you aim for at least 72 hours is kind of the recommendation, but it can be better if you aim for 2 weeks. This is the list that's everywhere. You Google build an emergency kit, and these are the things that show up. So again, your animal inventory list, your proof of ownership of those animals, maybe some handling equipment, extra feed and water, maybe some temporary animal ID if you don't have ID on them already, first aid kit for yourself, maybe some extra medications for the animals. Radio and flashlight is always recommended, and I laugh a little bit about the radio because I know I never actually listen to the radio anymore. So I might instead recommend a battery pack for charging your cell phone because you're probably going to be trying to use that for information, maybe more than the radio. Communication is always a bottleneck in any emergency response. No matter any type of emergency, We're always talking about how we can improve communication. There's always parts where communication breaks down and gets a little messy. But it can help to have some protocols or procedures in place. So if an emergency happens, who do you call for help? How do you communicate that out? How do you communicate with first responders? And how do first responders communicate with you? Because they won't necessarily know the ins and outs of your operation. You can test your plans, maybe verify, update your info, your supplies every 6 months, every year. You could even run drills if you wanted to with your employees, with your family, just to test how it would work in a fake, no pressure situation where it doesn't matter if you do something wrong. And there's a lot of resources out there to help. So this top QR code is for Animal Health Canada. That's their non-disease emergency resources. So that would be things like, you know, fires and floods, barn collapses, those types of things. The second QR code is to the Beef Cattle Research Council's biosecurity page. There's a lot of great info there in terms of biosecurity resources, as well as a ton of other stuff. Your province is a great resource. Your veterinarian is a good resource, and the county is an amazing resource. Many of the counties do have livestock emergency response plans that you can opt into in the case of an emergency in your area. This is an example. Rocky View County's farm emergency plan template is actually, it's quite a good template. You can just go through and fill it out. But you can adapt those to your needs. So adapt them to your own specific situation and make sure that they hit your vulnerabilities and your trigger points. There's also livestock response trailers in most of the counties across Alberta. There used to be a dedicated line for these. Now I'm told that you call 911 and ask for them. I'm also told sometimes the 911 dispatch doesn't know what you're talking about. But they do exist, and you can potentially get something out where these livestock trailers can actually help in the case of something like a rollover. Think about whether you might be sheltering in place. What does that look like for your operation? Do you have feed and water? What are you going to do about fencing situations? If you've got a lot of cross fencing in a fire, that might become problematic. Do you have open space or high ground you can move animals to in the case of a flood? ID and ownership is really key if you're moving animals to where they may be commingled or if you have to cut fences. In the case of an evacuation, what's your transport plan? Think about what that transport plan looks like for you. Can you haul all of your animals somewhere else in the case of an emergency? I would suggest that with herd sizes in Alberta, that's going to be a little bit problematic to do in a timely fashion for a lot of people if they don't have a plan. Turn off the power. Secure large objects if you have time. If you have time, label any hazardous materials and store them in a safe place. And if you can, identify and remove potential fire hazards if you do have to evacuate. I'm going to switch gears a little bit now to talk about my sort of wheelhouse a little bit more, and that's the disease angle, particularly for an animal disease. So when we're thinking about biosecurity, and I know that seems like a scary, hard word because we raise animals outside and we can't protect them from everything they may come into contact with, like some other sectors may have the ability to do. But what we're really thinking about is either stopping disease from entering the herd in the first place. That's kind of your best case scenario. Or stopping it from spreading within the herd. And then, of course, we want to stop it from leaving the herd. I think our real concern with our volume of animal movements in Alberta is not finding something very contagious for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and it just spreads unnoticed. These are kind of the main ways that diseases spread between operations. Animal movement is obviously the big one we think about, but we don't maybe often think about what we call fomites, which are things like vehicles, trailers, sometimes equipment, sometimes even people. So some diseases can stay on clothing and footwear and hands for longer than you think they should be able to live. Semen and artificial insemination can also be a method of disease transfer. there are also resources to help you with this. So this seems hard, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about doing the easy things first. So think about identifying and documenting your animal and herd movements on a regular basis. If you're bringing in any new animals, think, if you can, try and get a herd health history. Simple quarantine of new cattle or cattle that have been commingled when they come back to your operation can make a big difference in some diseases. And if you do have an outbreak of something, even if it's scours, try and work with the sick cattle last, so you're not tracking it back to the healthy ones. These are a couple more biosecurity type resources. They have self-assessment checklists where you can kind of go through and then find out where your gaps are. And they also have some templates. I would also say right now in Alberta, VBP Plus has dollars available for implementation funding. I think it's a 50% cost share up to $5,000 to bring producers in alignment with certification, or $2,500 if it's just for the training part of VBP. But this would cover items like veterinarian assessments of your biosecurity or herd health protocols, equipment like segregation pens or fencing for stored feed sites or dead stock sites, costs associated with potentially setting up a cleaning and disinfection site. I think you can even get wand readers out of this for enhanced traceability. If you search the Verified Beef Production Plus incentive, that should come up. So it's in Alberta. It's on our ABP site somewhere as well, on albertabeef.org. I'm just not sure exactly where it is, but it's there somewhere. But if you search Alberta VBP Plus incentive, you should get there. And again, just a ton more resources. The bottom QR code is from Iowa State, and they have awesome stuff there. The Secure Beef Supply Plan out of the US also has awesome stuff. It is geared towards trying to maintain business continuity in the case of a foot and mouth disease outbreak. So some of it is kind of intense, but you can take bits and pieces. And what I really like about how these two resources have set things up is they've kind of set it up like stairs. So you have kind of your daily day-to-day biosecurity. And we've talked about some of those things that you can do day to day. Start small, right? And then you can move up to kind of your daily level. And then you think about, what does it take to get to that enhanced level if there is a disease outbreak in your area, in Alberta, maybe in Saskatchewan. Think about, because if you start at the bottom and try to jump all the way up to the top of those stairs, it's going to be really, really hard. So just think about little steps you can take over time that make it easier to get to that enhanced phase if something super bad were to happen. And I kind of think of this almost a little bit like a will, right? So you think it's really hard and you need a lawyer and it seems like a lot of work, but all you really need in most cases is a template to follow, right? There might be some specific situations where you need to consult with a lawyer, not a lawyer. But for myself, for example, I put this off for ages and ages because it seemed hard and I didn't want to do it and I didn't want to pay for a lawyer and it just seemed icky. But my sister did one. And then she gave me her template and I was like, oh, this is really easy because I just have to copy and paste it and like change a few names and things. So that made it really easy, but it also made it real, right? And then you're thinking about, oh, what if the worst happens? So I think that's where we get stuck in a mindset of, well, we don't want to think about the worst things happening because it makes it real. And it seems hard until you start with those little steps. And templates are a great way to do that. So I want to talk a little bit about foreign animal disease because I have a soapbox here and I'm going to use it. These are diseases that are not generally detected in Canada. Broadly, these are the reportable diseases, either federally or provincially. Think about things like brucellosis or Rift Valley fever. Usually, they're global concerns through the World Organization for Animal Health. Generally speaking, they're very contagious or transmissible, or they can have high economic like production limiting or public health consequences. And these trigger a response action either by the province or by CFIA. And the response would either be to eradicate or control the disease. When we have a suspicion of a foreign animal disease, there may be voluntary measures that people in the general vicinity may want to think about taking. That's maybe stepping up your biosecurity, maybe keeping a few better records, thinking about who's visiting your place and who you let on your place and where you're going. But a response might not be applied uniformly across all premises. And I think that's important to recognize. On confirmation, there will be movement controls around any infected premise. That's just how that happens. They'll get put under quarantine. And then what happens is we essentially try to trace all the movements that might be just animal movements, but it might include people or vehicles or other things, depending on the disease. This is where tag purchases and retirements and feedlots over 1,000 head reporting move-in data actually really helps Alberta, because this actually cuts down on the tracing time that you have to sort through lists of manifests and producer records. The next phase in a foreign animal disease response is where we do control, eradication, and surveillance. So some diseases vaccines are available for, so there might be a vaccination period. There might be depopulation and disposal, cleaning and disinfection, and then finally you can move through restocking and surveillance. And through this all is a huge amount of stress on the industry and on individual producers. So think about that mental wellness piece, check in on your neighbors, check in on yourself, make sure that you're taking some time, because it is incredibly stressful and incredibly scary. The response looks a little bit different depending on what type of premise you are. So I just kind of want to quickly walk through what it looks like for an infected premise, and then we'll kind of talk about the rest. So this is where the disease has actually been found, generally through clinical symptoms and then laboratory testing. The quarantines will usually be all premises with susceptible animals for that disease within at least 3 kilometers, and then they might expand that to 10. Depending on the disease. And then again, we'll do tracing of all movements where records really become important. For a lot of our diseases, we're looking at an eradication strategy. So that's where we go to depopulation and disposal. This will include things that can't be disinfected. There is CFIA compensation for animals ordered destroyed or things ordered destroyed. Right now, the compensation is $16,500 for purebred animals and $10,000 for a commercial animal. Those are the maximums. That doesn't mean you're going to get the maximums. CFIA calculates compensation based on market values at the time they were ordered destroyed. Disposal must also adhere to provincial and municipal regs. Generally speaking, animals on infected premises cannot be slaughtered for human consumption, though with some diseases we can take those animals through a slaughter plant. Cleaning and disinfection, usually the plan is provided by CFIA in conjunction with the producer, but usually they tell you what you need to do and they approve that, but costs are not covered. There's no program out there right now that covers any costs due to cleaning and disinfection. After all the animals have been depopulated and disposed of, there's generally a vacancy period, which will vary according to disease. Restocking may require some sentinels. Those are just animals that they kind of leave on there for a while to make sure they don't get sick. New animals would have to come out of any control zone areas. If you're not intending to restock at all, like you're done, the quarantine is generally released after cleaning and disinfection and some follow period, which again would be variable according to the disease and the time of year. And some diseases may require a final examination and test before the quarantine is released. So they may have to come back on those restocked animals and do more testing before that final quarantine can be released. So that was an infected farm. I would say actually, there are more economic impacts to farms that are not the infected farm, but end up under quarantine due to proximity or due to tracing. So those would be our contact, our proximity, or a monitored premise. These, again, generally go under quarantine. They'll have special biosecurity requirements in some cases. There may be additional surveillance, and depending on the disease, there might be testing. This is where vaccination would likely occur. Most of the time, vaccination would not occur on an infected premise. It would occur on the premises around it to kind of create a buffer zone around where the disease is to stop it from spreading. Generally speaking, these animals would need to be permanently identified for the rest of their life, depending on whether that was killed right away after or if they were living out their normal lives. Again, there may be depop and disposal of any animals that react to a test, of any trace animals that had exposure to a disease. If animals were vaccinated, we need to know whether they were naturally infected or vaccinated, and that's called a DIVA test. So they may require this DIVA test before they're allowed to move anywhere. And movement controls may actually remain on these vaccinated animals for the rest of their lives. When we're talking about recovery and how to get back to normal, there are some business risk management programs that talk about business continuity. So these are your programs like agri-recovery, agri-stability, like crop insurance, those types of things. I would say right now that we do not have a good program that deals specifically with animal disease. We're looking to reestablish market access if borders were closed as soon as possible. This means we have to have a really good idea of the scope of the disease, make sure that we've contained it before we can actually have conversations with other countries about reestablishing that market access. And of course, there is a political component to that. And then we need to think about what can be improved for next time. And usually communication is, again, top of that list. And I think it's, again, I just want to make sure that everyone recognizes the trauma and residual impacts that can come from an investigation like this. Even if it went fairly smoothly, I think Brent might even speak to this a little, that it is really, really stressful, and there are resources out there that can help. In a foreign animal disease, producers are actually farm activities. The official CFIA language is that producers are responsible for depopulation, disposal, cleaning, and disinfection. In practice, the operations folks at CFIA do try to help out with this as much as they can. Private vets and first responders have a role to play, right? You can rely on your veterinarian, you can communicate with first responders. The regulatory authority, whether that's the chief veterinary officer, whether it's CFIA or an emergency management agency, obviously they'll be running the response and kind of dictating what happens. Producer organizations primarily do communications and planning. We can do some other things as requested, but that's our primary role. Provide knowledge and information and support. One of the things about knowledge, the rumor mill gets running really fast in any of these situations, and we try to help to get key messages out. Communication almost always gets messy. Things get lost. Ask questions. Don't be scared to reach out for help and advocate for what supports you need. I would encourage you to think about your capacity to undertake some of these roles, and if you don't think you have it, that means you need a plan. Think about what you would do if you were placed under quarantine for a period of time, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months. What would you do? How could you keep your operation running? Think about what you would do in terms of obtaining equipment, supplies. How could you support tracing efforts or vaccination? Depopulation and disposal is a scary one, and one we haven't got a lot of good answers for, honestly. The Ag Service Boards actually have a responsibility under legislation to assist in the control of animal disease under the Animal Health Act in Alberta. So they can be an excellent resource and source of support as well. And just as I wrap up, I just challenge producers to think about how can you make this the easiest on yourself if the worst was to occur. Don't expect first responders or even CFIA or even vets from the province to really know about your livestock and your operation. You have to help them through that process. And yeah, with that, I can stop sharing and take questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen, for that amazing presentation. Now we'll open the floor for Q&A. We will wait 10 minutes for the Q&A session, and then we will move on to a second speaker. But Karen will be here until the end of the webinar. And if somebody forget to ask questions or the time was not enough, they can always ask in the end. Okay. Is there anything else you want to add on, Karen, by the time people are asking questions? And Kevin, if you want, you can start sharing your screen and everything until then.
Yeah, I think I ran through it all.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any questions coming in right now.
Let me off easy. I like that.
Yeah. Okay, Kevin, do you want to? Okay, she is. Okay, perfect. Are there any questions for Karen? And if there's someone who doesn't like typing, they can raise their hand and I can allow them to talk. Is there anything else, Karen, you want to add on so that by the time people are talking, no?
No, if people want to wait till the end and ask questions, then that's fine too. I'll be around.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any questions coming in right now. How about we wait another minute or two and
I either scared them to death or was very thorough. One of those two things.
Yes, it was very thorough for sure, and it was really amazing. Yeah. Okay. Are there any questions? Okay, let's wait another minute if there is any question that comes in. If not, then we will move on to Kevin. No questions? Okay, I guess we'll move on to Kevin now. I don't see any questions coming in. Okay, so next up we have Kevin Fornell from Beaver Emergency Services. Okay, over to you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the Battle River Research Group for the invitation here to speak today. That's great. I'd also like to thank Karen. You gave a great presentation. It touched on a lot of the points actually I'm going to touch on, so thank you. But emergency management, preparedness is such a vast, expansive industry, basically. There's so many aspects you can look at it from, whether you're beef producer, grain producer, to a simple farm, even homes, businesses. There's a lot that can relate to that emergency preparedness aspect, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So again, thank you. My name is Kevin Fornell. I am the Director of Emergency Management for the Beaver Emergency Services Commission, and I'm here with Kayla Miller. She's the Emergency Management Coordinator for the Beaver Emergency Services Commission. So I'm going to pass it off to her for a little bit of the talk, as well as she has some points to bring up. So together we'll bring you a little bit of a presentation here on emergency preparedness. So, okay, so the agenda overview basically of what we're going to talk about today. So understanding the emergency risks in Alberta. What hazards do we face? What precautions, if any, can we take to prepare for them? As well, developing an emergency preparedness plan, which is very important as to what actions can we take to be more prepared and ready our response. With developing that plan, it helps us to protect people, livestock, and our property. And what resources are out there, what training can be given or taken, and what community support is out there, when and how do we access that, and do we have the contact list? Basically, are we prepared to reach out and have that conversation? So Why emergency management matters. So basically, in Alberta, in rural areas especially, it focuses on identifying risks early and trying to ensure farmers and rural residents have measures in place to protect their people, livestock, and property. There are numerous risks which we can encounter in Alberta. Some we can prevent or lessen the damage from, some are a little harder to deal with. But basically, understanding these risks is the first step in building safer and more resilient rural communities. So we're just going to look at some of the common hazards affecting rural and farm areas. So wildfires, that's a big thing recently in the past few years that have become more prevalent. So the Alberta Emergency Management Agency shows that wildfires have burned millions of acres in recent years, causing significant disruptions, not only to infrastructure like buildings, but destroying feed, machinery, croplands, and more. Another risk we take is flooding. So reoccurrent risk due to snowmelt in the spring, heavy rains during the summer months, that is a problem, impacting some infrastructure as well as access. Severe winter storms, whether extreme cold or blizzards that can affect farm operations, but also like flooding, it's being able to access those roads. And I know Karen brought that up a little bit about being able to evacuate livestock if you do need to do anything like emergencies, stuff like that. So that is an important thing. I use the example this winter in Beaver County, some roads were impassable for days. We actually had calls in which our emergency services, I am the fire chief, I'm also a paramedic supervisor, but we had to get tractors to help come get access into farm yards and farm areas. We were actually met on the highway and people would say, you know what, we can't access, you won't be able to access our property or these roads, we need to clear a path for you. So that getting access down to your property. So that's either access in or out you have to be cognizant of. So without that, there would be no access, potential harm, or the risk would increase. The next one, barn fire hazards again. So wildfire spread, small local yard fire spread, you start a fire, it spreads to your barn. You got to be cognizant of that, but also poorly maintained structures, many cases have potential to destroy equipment and livestock. So you take that into consideration as well. The other 2 points I talked about, barn fire hazards, your barn catches on fire, you dial 911, fire trucks can't get to your place. How much are you going to lose by not having that appropriate access? Droughts, extended periods of low precipitation. So how is that going to affect farmers' crop yields, pasture shortages, the water supply? Again, the higher risk of grass and wildfires, that's the potential that could spread. Hailstorms common in the prairies during the summer, some can be quite severe. Crop damage, injury to animals, damage to barns, destruction of greenhouse, and shelter belts as well. Livestock illness or death, I know Karen alluded to that in her presentation. Potential quarantine or culling, impact with trade restrictions, biosecurity and containment costs. So those are all some of the common emergencies. The big ones, there are a lot more that can affect rural Alberta and some of the farmers. So some of the unique challenges that face us rural communities. So we talked about it earlier, the bad roads. Rural communities often encounter limited access to emergency services, longer response times, and geographical isolation. Often limited access to get in or out, many cases from the various storms, whether water or snow. Communication difficulties arise from poor cell phone coverage as well. Difficult getting access to emergency service and potentially your neighbors. If you need help, your neighbor just down the road and you're used to cell phones are down, weak cell phone spots. Some people I know have complained that recently in the Beaver County area, cell phone reception is diminished. And even surprisingly enough, we do have some dead spots which arise. So that's another thing to consider it. In addition, complex farm operations, including livestock and equipment, add layers of risk. These challenges require customized strategies, focusing on self-reliance, local coordination, that you will need more help, that do you have that help out there that you can access? And with that local coordination, do you have the connections to get help, or are you fully prepared to do it on your own? Recently, we had the cattle liner that rolled over. It had about 90 livestock in it. We phoned the livestock company and said, hey, we need your help in coming to get your animals off the highway. They said, yeah, we can mobilize. It would be 2 or 3 hours. With us and emergency responders, we did access that livestock trailer, which Karen talked about, that there are a few located in strategic areas of the province. So us, within probably half an hour, we had that livestock trailer on scene. We talked to local livestock producers that had stock trailers that we were able to organize ourselves, the removal of those animals from that scene. In coordination with the U of A Ranch, we were able to take them off and put them probably in half to quarter of the time that it would have took the actual agency to come and get their animals or take care of their product. That was in consultation with them. They were very appreciative, and it was less stress on the animals, obviously, and helped clear things up quicker. So you can see there are some unique challenges for farmers. The 4 phases of emergency management, again, Karen alluded to this a little bit in her presentation, which was great, but we'll just talk about it, how we can apply that to farmers as well. So mitigation, basically reducing the risk; preparedness, to plan and train; response, acting during emergency; and recover, restoring the operations. So in mitigation, the whole plan is to reduce the risk before an emergency develops, or potentially reduce the impact. So basically anything we can do to lessen that damage before a disaster occurs, that occurs in the mitigation phase. Preparedness, being ready before something happens; ensure that farm can respond quickly and safely. Overall, prepared farms respond faster and recover sooner. Response, actions during the emergency: protect life, livestock, and property. The safety of the people always come first. I know some people are willing to take some risks, but if you're hurt or injured, you can't take care of your farm property or livestock or anything. So you want to make sure you are prepared in safety. And the recovery aspect, returning to normal after the emergency. So how are we going to restore that normal farm operation and community stability? It's all about rebuilding back stronger and learning from the event. So some example for farm sites: conducting a damage assessment after it's done. Could it be built better or stronger? The losses, did you document them well for insurance and disaster assistance that may be available through the province? Repairing building, fencing, and infrastructure, again, building that all back better and stronger if possible. Restoring your livestock operations or crop production, as well as accessing government recovery programs. So basically, the key message there is about rebuilding back stronger and learning from the event. Events will happen. Hopefully it's very minimal, but if we do, we want to make sure we take some learning opportunities from that. So talking about the risk assessment for farms, basically it's identifying the vulnerabilities, those mitigation efforts which we talked about, which potentially reduces the damage and downtime, and enhancing farm resilience. So risk assessment enables farm operators to identify vulnerabilities can affect their farm, such as examples: fire hazards, poor roads, drainage, flood-prone areas, isolations from services, etc. Mitigation assessment basically allows those farms to identify what actions they need and what potential resources may be needed. So basically, what can we do to stop something bad from occurring or lessening that impact? Data actually shows that farms conducting regular risk assessments reduce damage and downtime after their emergencies. So a risk assessment is basically a good foundation for prioritizing mitigation efforts. Again, how can we prevent those emergencies or reduce their impact, and strengthen what you need for resource allocation? So ultimately enhancing resilience. So what will we be needing if we do have that occur in our area? So basically there's a lot here, but we're not going to go in depth on each one, but just basically taking a look at it. Sometimes it's the small things that matter, and that could include maintaining fire breaks, protecting infrastructure from severe weather, and safely storing fuels, kind of thing. So reducing risk on farms doesn't always require a major investment, and many hazards can be minimized through planning, maintenance, and clear communication. These 10 actions, as you see here, focus on the most common rural risks, and by taking steps ahead of time, farmers can reduce losses and protect their families, workers, and their livelihoods. So basically, you take a look and quickly create a farm emergency plan. Karen talked about that. Document emergency contacts, your evacuation routes and response procedures. We'll talk a little bit about evacuation routes as we still mentioned it before, but sometimes roads are bad. Are you giving the right information on how you get in and out of your property? Maintaining fire breaks, keeping vegetation cleared around building, fuel tanks and hay storage. Are you able to, if there is a small fire that occurs on your farm, that you're stopping it from becoming a big problem? At the end, we'll give an email to reach out for more information, but I've included a website there, farmfiresmart.ca. If you're familiar with the wildfire initiative of FireSmart, basically that's to stop forest fires from spreading and actions you can take. Farmfiresmart.ca is basically geared up for farms and allows assessments, information and stuff that people can take to make their farm more fire smart. So basically lessen the chance of fires. Secure fuel and chemical storage. Are you storing pesticides, fertilizers in well-contained areas, reducing the risk to your workers? That way no one gets hurt. Maintaining water sources. Ensure dugouts, water tank, and hydrants are accessible. So not only for droughts, having the water sources that are reliable, but also fire suppression. In the past few years, we've noticed there's been a significant increase with the amount of farmers that are readily prepared for fires. They either have small water tanks, big water tanks, pumps, or something that when we get there, the fire is either partially out or they've managed to contain the damage to areas which doesn't affect their farm site. Improve farm access. Again, keep driveways clear and strong enough for fire trucks and emergency vehicles. This works for both in and out. Can you get out in the event of emergency? Can we get in the event of emergency? Buildings and hazards. Is everything clearly labeled? Again, that's very important for when responders come into your yard. If there was a fire, do we know where fuel tanks are? That will be a prime area that we can say, yes, we need to protect this area as there's fuel tanks there. Electrical shutoffs as well. We need to shut the power off if we can fight any fire. Do you guys know where it is if there's an emergency? Are you able to shut it off for us, or are you able to tell us where it is? Most people do know. But in the event of panic or someone that's there or you're on holidays, do people know your yard where it could be, or do you potentially have a little map drawn out like Karen had there, which was awesome, that you could give to first responders and say, here's the prime location of what we have. Protecting the livestock, herd health programs, and identifying relocations areas during emergencies, preparing for severe weather, reinforcing the buildings, maintain equipment and utilities. Is your electrical system up to code? Is there any risk of a potential fire? And training your families and workers. Ensure everyone knows emergency procedures and hazard locations. It's one of those things that sometimes people hear training that it's going to be a regimented thing, that you got to sit in the classroom and have this training program. Sometimes it can be as simple as sitting at your coffee table, supper time, and saying, okay, you know, John down the road did have this fire. What would we do if we had a fire? Do we know where our fire extinguishers are? Do we have number for emergency? Well, 911 is basically emergency number, but if we need help from our neighbors, do we have that neighbor's number? Can we give them a call? I know before numbers by the phone were a thing when everybody has landlines, and some people do have landlines still. But with now, everybody has the number on your cell phone. If you're out there dealing with an emergency and you yell at your family member, call this person, how are they ever going to get that number? So sometimes either sharing those numbers or having a list of contacts is very important, especially now with new technology. So I will now pass it off to Kayla for some of the insurance monetary aspect talk of it. So.
Hello, I'm Kayla Miller, the Beaver Emergency Services Commission Emergency Management Coordinator. The couple slides that I'm going to speak about are the costs of disasters for producers. Oftentimes in the news or in documentation, we see costs as a bulk cost spread across the entire disaster area, which doesn't really hit home for producers as individual operations. So year over year, we are seeing disaster costs are significant and rising, ranging anywhere from $20,000 to over $250,000 in severe losses. And this is per event. With the weather and things that are going on in the province of Alberta, these are increasing year over year. And you could be looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And also what we're finding is government programs are really only covering a percentage, and you, the producer, are going to have to pay the rest. And that's going to come out of the pocket of the producers. Where the money goes during these disaster situations, there's immediate costs and long-term losses. So livestock evacuation, the trucking, the fuel, the per head cost, emergency feed and water, temporary pasture, vet care and animal loss, fence and infrastructure repair. Long-term losses that we see are lost production and income, reduced herd performance, rebuilding your breeding stock, and pasture recovery that can take years for that vegetation to renew. And many of these are not fully covered. And then this goes into where the money, this goes into protecting your operation and what you can control, because during disasters, that's not something we can control. But there are things that we can do to decrease the risk for your individual operation. So that is updating your insurance on a regular basis. A lot of us just assume that we're covered for everything and don't realize what's not covered or what's only going to be covered at a certain cost. So updating your insurance, so reflect on your herd size, your assets, rising costs, infrastructure and feed exposure. Get a professional insurance assessment, call your brokers, identify your coverage gaps, understand what's not covered, and plan for those evacuation scenarios. Be proactive, not reactive. So as the disasters are increasing and recovery is going to probably take years, it's better to be proactive and plan for things to go wrong. Proper insurance and planning can be the difference between recovery and setback. And the biggest takeaway here isn't just the cost, it's the gap in the coverage and all the small things that we tend to overlook. Many producers don't realize what isn't covered until after something happens, because it isn't a problem until it's a problem. A simple insurance review and an assessment can prevent major financial stress. And I will bring the camera back to Kevin for more information.
All right, so we're just going to go now into developing an emergency preparedness plan. So talk a little bit about what that entails, the key components, and there are programs out there which assess and will help you create it. Lots of people may think it is a daunting task of how am I going to do this with my farm, but the information is out there. I am going to leave my email into our office at the end of this or whatever, and that's the one thing in my years of emergency service, that's the number one thing I've probably seen, is that people will be like, I didn't know this, or I didn't know what I could do to prepare, or how would I prevent this next time? The information is out there. And if you look at some of the farm preparedness planning, there's huge, almost books on it, on little things, little aspects for your farm. So it wouldn't be for everybody, but there are key components or little minimal things that you can do that can make things run a little better. And those are the key ones we want to look at. So emergency plans for farms includes hazard identification, resource inventories. So basically, who can you call for help? The numbers are out there. The number one go-to is 911, and we do receive a lot of calls, various for everything, being in the farm or emergency medical aspect side of it. And we do have resources that we can call on. So the one is that you phone 911 and it's an animal livestock emergency. We can get access through that, through the livestock trailers like Karen talked about a little earlier, or we do have local resources. The Beaver Emergency Services Commission is the disaster management agency for all of Beaver County. So what we're doing is developing a resource list of what we can do, that if someone phones and says, yeah, we do have a big major emergency or disaster, that falls into our area a little bit. It's like, yeah, we can maybe help you. We have numbers of contacts, people with pens, cattle liners, stuff like that, that we're trying to create that list and make it stronger. Stuff like that just creates a stronger Beaver County. Realistically, emergencies don't happen in a silo, so no farmer should have to deal on everything on their own. And realistically, they won't. Neighbors are more than willing to help out, but there also is the emergency services aspect and other groups that are willing to come help in the event of emergency as well. So communication protocols, communication with family, workers. Can you get through to help 911? Neighbors that are next to you, do you have their numbers? How are you reaching out? It's good to have effective communication. And as was said before, communication is the first to break down. You want to make sure that communication is strong in your farm. Evacuation procedures. Again, bad road needs a head up. As roads are bad this way, don't come from the north, please go to the south. Don't take this road's bad, etc. So recovery plans, do you have enough insurance, backup equipment and feed? Studies have shown that farms with documented plans recover about 40 times faster after disasters. And as well, those livestock response trailers, they're great. They have pens. Again, they're geared up for more smaller events, but they do carry stuff that can be very, very, very beneficial in the event of a disaster. So, and family roles and training. Does everybody know what they kind of need to do? And it's better to have that talk and maybe do a little bit of a practice run through first before a disaster happens. Because sometimes an emergency develops and you try starting yelling, we need to go here, we need to do this. It's just going to create a very stressful condition. So we would just want to make sure that you do that practice. Practice makes perfect in knowing what needs to be done. So again, the emergency contact lists. Written emergency contact list should encompass family, neighbors, local emergency services, veterinarians, utility providers, anyone you think you can reach out or have the potential to reach out to on your farm that can help you would be great. Alternate communication like radios due to limited cell phone coverage. Do you have the walkie-talkies on your farm? An alternate source. I know fire, we carry it and they are quite well, so that might be something. If you did have a major farm incident, you might have to buddy with a firefighter that can radio communications around. So regularly updated and readily accessible contact information greatly reduces that confusion during a crisis if you're scrambling for numbers, scrambling for contact. So evacuation routes and shelter plans. So we've talked about that a little bit already in both the presentation prior and earlier. Safe evacuation routes, shelters, preparedness and drills. So identifying multiple safe routes considering weather and road conditions. Farms should have designated shelters for people and livestock with contingency plans if primary options become available. Say, for example, you say, yeah, no, I've already talked to my neighbor and we're willing to move down the road. Something's happened to him, we can't. Do you have a plan A, plan B, plan C? And that might be where you do call 911 and discuss it with the emergency management agency in the area. As we've started planning some of that, hey, if we have a significant livestock event, like a cattle liner that goes over, we've talked to some of the people already, like stampede grounds, stuff like that, that are able to house animals, we may be able to move them there. So that's something you want to make sure you have that contact and reach out. So mapping tools and drills improve your readiness. So evacuation plans reduce error during an actual emergency. So if you practice that and say, okay, fine, say we got to move all these animals today. Okay, what are we doing? Oh, well, grab the truck and trailer. Well, where's the truck and trailer? Okay, no, it's here. Like, you always want to make sure you're thinking of those little things, which just avoids that little bit of confusion if anything happens. So safe evacuation, letting people know coming in and out, designate shelters, having a place to relocate your animals, your neighbors. And again, do you have plan A, plan B, plan C? So being prepared is basically about practice and having those conversations to be more prepared. Is everybody ready? So protecting people, livestock, and property. So we're going to talk about farm safety for families and workers, emergency care and relocation of animals, and basically securing equipment and facilities against some of the hazards we will see. So Safety protocols, regular training on machinery, knowing how to use, shut down, troubleshooting, etc. Fire prevention measures. Have you made the area fire smart? Anything you can control or eliminate? Do you have extinguishers? Are your extinguishers still good? Do you get them regularly checked? Do you have pumps? Do you have a water tank? Is everything running and prepared? Can you go grab that if you need to? Recent years, farmers, like I said, have definitely become more prepared, that we've seen more people that have the water tanks. Even a little pump in their yard makes a huge difference in preparing major structures or stopping that fire from spreading into anything. So proper chemical handling. Our work is aware of procedures for accidental spill or exposure, the fire hazard reduction, as well as potential spill or contamination. First aid preparedness. Karen talked a little bit about the 72-hour kit. Are you prepared to stay for 72 hours? What about a first aid kit? Do you have a first aid kit? Do people know it? And do you have a kit? I've seen numerous farmers that have done amazing first aid. Usually it's with the rag that they use to clean their grease gun, but they have stopped the bleeding. They've used their belts as tourniquets. If you do have a first aid kit, you do have that commercially prepared stuff, which will eventually help down the road and prevent that infection. But in the meantime, anything will stop the bleeding, but helping to make sure you have the right equipment at the right time does a lot. So injury control basically reports that farms with safety programs have 30% fewer injuries. So encouraging that safety culture is vital to help people prepare. So emergency care and relocation of animals, again, that advanced evacuation planning. Where are they going? Do they have temporary housing? Is there going to be feed there? Is there going to be water there? Species specific emergency plans, safe zones for animal protection. So again, we don't want animals mixing, especially if there's that livestock disease or illness or anything like that. Just making sure that's all coordinated. Coordinating with your shelters and vets. Do they have any expertise they can be helping you? Making that contact maybe a little bit first would improve the animal welfare, so they can offer solutions, reach out before and know what available instead of trying to scramble at the time of the emergency. Especially it could be in after hours and it might be tough getting a hold of anybody. So reaching out first is a very key part. So securing equipment and facilities against the hazards. So they are the common sense ones that sometimes overlook. Protecting fuel supplies. So are your fuel supplies, are they clearly marked and somewhat protected if a fire broke out? Those aren't areas you want a lot of dense dry grass around and fire hazard increase, so you want to make sure that's limited. Are the hazard materials stored properly, marked as to their location, and some training on accidental exposure? Again, those site maps are great for emergency responders. If you have one and you're busy hustling around, that you could give it to them and say, okay, here's my emergency map, here's where the hazards are marked, here's what you need to know. That's great. Reinforcing buildings against winds. Insurance data indicates that farms investing in protective measures usually have about 25 to 40% less damage. So preventative maintenance and hazard proofing are very cost-effective resilience strategies, that if there's anything you can fortify or invest in or protect, that's a great thing to be able to do. So the resources, training, and community support. So basically talking about what you can access from Alberta Emergency Management resources or other agencies, training and drills for family and staff, and building those networks with local neighbors and community. So emergency management resources, they have a lot of training and preparedness guides. Some actually do offer site inspections and actual certifications. I think it's Ag Safe Alberta, I believe, is the one. If not, I can find that information out for you, that they will actually come and do a farm site assessment and just ensure that your farm is safe and offer you opportunities for improvement. The Alberta Emergency Alert System, that's a great thing that the province has now. It's an app you can get on your phone that if there is an emergency in your community, whether severe weather or something bad has the potential to happen, if you're close to highways or railroad tracks, it'll give you a heads up. Funding programs are tailored for rural and farm communities. Awareness and utilization of some of these more resources remain uneven. So there's lots of people that don't know about it. So getting the word out there that they exist with some of these preparedness program would be a huge asset. And these tools complement personal planning efforts and links farmers to professional support. So you can plan for your farm all you want, and some might do an amazing job, but just to know there are those resources one step further out there that can help you in the event of an emergency. So training and drills for farm families and staff. So the importance of drills. Improve familiarity with emergency plans, boosting the confidence and response speed. So again, it doesn't have to be a big formal thing, but standing out there one day and say, you know what, this tractor just caught on fire. Where's our first aid fire extinguisher? Okay, go grab it. Is it good? Where's our first aid kit if emergency happens? So conducting those drills tend to experience fewer major mishaps, so it will lessen the severity often. So some of the training topics you can include first aid, fire response, evacuations, equipment shutdowns, community workshops further supplement in-house training. So again, seminars like this and the Battle River Research Group doing stuff like this is an important thing, because this can be shared. You can talk with your family, workers, or whatever, watch this and say, hey, here's some of the points. Does anything jump out at you as being really, really important on what we should talk about? So, and as well, community workshops. I know the Beaver Emergency Services Commission, or BSE, we're hoping to increase some of these awareness projects and seminars, trying to get more information sessions out there. So hopefully farmers can attend. I know there's lots around the whole Fire Smart program for forest fires. We're not in a heavily forested area, but ones that are pertinent to our area would be great. That if we could bring out community members and people that can talk about building up that resilience and preparedness for farms. So the big thing is building networks with neighbors and local responders. So strong community networks enable resource sharing, call on them for mutual aid, and have that coordinated response. Fire breaks out in a rural community, we're lucky farmers are there. Fire trucks show up, often we're usually beat by 3 or 4 tractors with discs already doing the work or whatever. So it is that network of farmers that's going to reach out. So the collaboration with local responders, there you show the picture of the farmer talking with the firemen, the police, and possibly the EMS about where to go. Mapping is huge. You know your property, we don't. So giving that update of, no, you don't want to go to this approach, it's the second approach, go in here, we want to protect this area. There's granaries on the other side of this bush line, make sure you protect that. That's information we know. Sometimes us going in blind, we don't have access to that information, so we need to make sure that's provided to us. That is huge for us. So formal neighborhood plans, sometimes it's a little difficult to do, but it improves your efficiency during the crisis and just makes everything run better. If your neighbors know kind of what your plan are, like, hey, if we ever have a fire, we're bringing our livestock over to you, or an emergency, our livestock's coming to you, or you have that big water tanker. If we have a fire, can we bring it over to you? And they say, actually, yeah, I have to. Yeah, we can always be prepared. It just increases that preparedness and response capability. And the stronger your community network is, the more contact you have, the more it expands your resource capability and helps you make you more prepared. Again, we can't do it all on our own, so having that potential to expand, call on our neighbors, friends, professional people, it's just a huge asset. So in conclusion, we're going to build resistant rural communities through preparedness. So basically, prepared farms recover faster, planning reduces losses, coordination with responders improves outcomes, and emergency management is a shared responsibility we all undertake. So once you understand the unique emergency risks and challenges in rural Alberta, that's crucial basically so you can start developing those plans. Every farm is different, so please take time to look around yours and see if there's anything that you can control. Emergency plans, protecting people, the livestock and property, leveraging community resources, and training are all key steps towards resilience. By implementing these strategies, rural and farm communities can enhance safety and preparedness, ensuring they are equipped to face emergencies effectively. So just that little preparedness goes a long way. So I know that was a fair bit to cover, and I talk fairly quick sometimes, I apologize, but my email is there, dem@bsc.ca, and I've been in emergency, like I said, for a long time now, and that's the one thing lots of people say, I wasn't prepared, what can I do, what can I access? This gives you a chance to reach out and access, and I will make sure you get any information that you request of us, and we're more than willing to help out and make sure our community is more prepared. So again, thank you for your time, thank you for listening, again, thank you to the Battle River Research Group. Any questions?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kevin. Now we'll open the floor again for Q&A, and if you have any questions, please type it in the Q&A section. And if you're not good at typing, you can always raise your hand and I can allow you to talk. Somebody said great presentation, Kevin.
Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome. Are there any questions? I guess you guys are doing an amazing job.
Yeah,
Not a
can
lot
I
of
just make,
questions.
can you hear me now,
Cover
Kaber?
everything that.
Sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Brent, just give 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. We'll see if there's a question starts coming in.
I just wanted to
If-
make a comment on Kevin's thing
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the
for sure. Go ahead.
directions. I've been in on a few wrecks, and it's way better to have somebody drive out and meet the first responder, especially if it's not coming to a yard site, or even if it isn't a yard site. So many of our yards are so big, people don't know exactly where to go to. If they can meet a pickup out on the road and follow them in, that just saves a pile of time and prevents uncertainty.
Oh, absolutely. We do numerous calls out to the colonies, and some of the colonies are huge, and if it's not even in a main area, if we don't have that guided way in, it's very, very difficult. Yeah, no, excellent point.
Perfect. Yeah, I guess there's no questions for. Maybe I'm wondering people will ask more questions in the end. Okay,
Are
I
you sure
guess.
they're there?
Sorry?
Are you sure we have people listening?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. Yeah. You can see in the corner there says 15 participants. Okay, I guess we will move on to our third speaker then if there's no questions. Okay. So the last speaker of the day is Brent Heidecker from Coral View Farms Limited. Over to you, Brent.
Okay, our farm had a experience with a TB trace out, and I prepared this talk for a group in New Brigden in the fall. So if some of the context is a little off, that's why I was too lazy to do this over. But July 2nd of this last summer, CFIA notified us that we were part of a trace out. We had bought 16 head of cows at a Southern Alberta auction that originated from the same herd that had a cow show up at the packing plant in Brooks in the previous summer. This purchase of ours was done in 2021. The cow that was TB positive showed up at the plant in 2024. So even though there was such a disconnect on timing, when there is a positive TB cow, there's an attempt made to trace everything that went in and out of that herd for 5 years. So we were caught up in that. So yeah, after the initial contact, which I didn't really understand the gravity of, we were sent this very long questionnaire trying to assess our operation and understand what the risks were. If we did end up with something that was infected, and we are a fairly large farm, and we buy pound cows in auctions daily across all of Western Canada. And depending on the conditions, we often preg test those cows and attempt to be the last calf ranch. And so we're a nightmare to Karen's comments on biosecurity and whatnot. We break pretty much every rule. So yeah, these cows that we purchased were mixed with about 150 other cows from other markets before they were preg tested. So we didn't know if there was any pregnant ones found in that group. So with all of that uncertainty, ultimately CFIA decided they had to test. I'll get back to my script here so I don't get lost. But yeah, September 15th, we did a video call with a group from CFIA to go over the questionnaire. And then we were given a quarantine order at the end of that September 15th call. So yeah, when Karen speaks about the quarantines and whatnot, until you're in it, it seems fairly academic, and it's something that's never going to happen to me. So 15th of September, we had, hellish good year last year. Everything was out grazing. We're in the middle of harvest. There is no good time for this to happen. But so we were only quarantined. We've got quite a few cows spread out locally, as well as with some other producers elsewhere in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Only the cows that had any potential contact with these suspects were quarantined. So none of our off-site cows were quarantined, and we had some pastures of cattle that we just bought in the spring and kicked out that had no potential contact with this previous suspect that we did not have to quarantine. So we fortunately, I guess, had a lot of empty space in our feed yard at the time because we'd been doing a significant rebuild. We and pretty much had those pens done in the fall, ready for fall run. And well, there was no fall run here because we were under quarantine and we needed to use those pens and facilities to test. Once we so we were under quarantine, but they hadn't decided if we had to test yet. So then September 29th, they told us we had to test all of the quarantined animals. So that's anything that had any potential contact. They repeatedly told me, and I would even say almost encouraged me to not tell anybody. You have every right to maintain confidentiality. And given that if you go on the CFIA's website, it'll show you how many herds have been tested over this case, and I think it's approaching 100 within Alberta. And I bet you very few of you people have heard of many. I chose to go the other route, and I called every one of our fence line neighbors that day. Very tough calls to make when, in the event if we would have found a positive in ours, it would have had pretty profound impacts on the entire beef business in Alberta, but even more severe on any fence line neighbor or any of the 3 kilometer neighbor, which turns into a pile of people. I think we just got county maps out and figured out the fence line neighbors, and I think we had 29 of them, which that surprised me. Much of what Kevin talked about as well, we live in pretty good communities. We give each other a hand, and I was really, really taken by the amount of support I got on those calls. I was expecting to get ripped on by a few of them, and none of that happened. The common comment I got was, okay, this is shitty, how do we help? And so that was helpful. So then you roll around to testing, and you see these SUVs roll into your yard that all have CFIA lettering on their door. That makes you near nauseous. But the CFIA provides the test crew, but it's up to you to get the cows home and put them through the chute. The procedure is a very small, like 1/10 of a cc injection, kind of in the hairless skin just east of the rectum. And then that injection site is palpated 3 days later. And if there's any swelling or lump shows up, that's considered a reactor. We had just did our rebuild, so we had a lot of our feedlot empty, which was helpful. We had to put about 1,500 cows through test. So, that entailed gathering them off grass, They had calves on, which we typically do not keep at the home place. Our typical weaning program is to send those calves to a backgrounder in southern Alberta. Due to the quarantine, we couldn't. So those calves all had to stay in the home feedlot. So we set up to knock through 500 cows a day each Tuesday, and then palpating happened on Friday to give that 3 day spread, and then anything with a lump considered a reactor. We just piled them up over the 3 weeks, and at the end of the 3 weeks, we I'll get to that more. Back to my script. Um, the the test crews they send out, I mean, CFA probably doesn't have the best reputation, and I certainly got plenty of editorial comment about, some of the policy and the management of it, but the test crews they sent out to the yard were very, very competent, pleasant. They absolutely understood the gravity of the situation and what they were doing. We they let us decide kind of. I told them I wanted to hear that we'd have a cow in the chute at 7 in the morning, zero opposition. I think most of them they come from all different directions. Red Deer, Lloyd, Calgary. So they come out and camped in Coronation overnight, and we're out here when we were ready to go. I knew a lot of the people that were involved in the large um, TB situation in the Jenner country 5 years or 8 years or whatever it was earlier. So I had a bit of an idea how well, how this would work. And the beauty of bringing these cattle back to the yard is we got a pretty good processing facility. We were able to have those 500 cows done by 2 on the days that we were injecting them. And when we were palpating them, it was unbelievably fast. We were, started, we put the 500 through in 4 hours, would be done by 11. CFIA seems, we never had the same crew twice. You get different people each time. The people were fine. They knew what site they were going to and what tests they were doing, and that was typically about it. But once again, we treated these people well. They got lunch. We had no complaint with them. We were told to expect about 3% of the cows would react. We were fortunate we only got 1.4%. Was 26 head. A plant to kill these cows in can be difficult to find. The large federal plants want nothing to do with it. They're concerned with keeping their chain running, at a high speed. And if they're, I think there's some rules on exporting if they were TB suspects, even if they're not positive. And then anything with lesions is going to have to be held for laboratory work, which the large plant's going to have no interest in doing. There was talk of killing them on farm. They asked my permission if we would cooperate with that. And when you get into this thing, all you want is over. So I said, well, I think that's kind of a crime against humanity to waste that meat. But if we can't find any other option, absolutely. Another side note there, they asked if I'd be able to find somebody that could shoot the cattle. Well, first they asked if we could kill them in our squeeze, and I said, well, we could, but we've had enough animals die, sick animals being treated in there, and it's about a 40-minute ordeal to get them out, and trying to get a skid steer into the building and whatnot, and plenty of risk of knocking the place down. So I said, no, shooting them would be way better. They said, no, we can't do that, but if you can find somebody that can, then that's fine. CFA is not allowed to have a firearm apparently, but I told him I'm get this done. I'll get it done so that we can get on with life. But with phone calls and me maybe calling in some favors, I was able to find a small abattoir that was willing to take the cows. They they end up buying them at a pretty significant discount, so there's a incentive for them to participate as well. So yeah, by slaughter day, I'd had lots of sleep deprived nights trying to learn everything I can about TB. I emailed the CFIA and told them that I would be attending the slaughter. I quite expected to get pushback on that and didn't get anything. Yeah, if there was animals with lesions, I wanted to see them. Uh, I hauled the reactors myself to the plant the day prior. You load these bred cows on the truck, they all look just fine. That's kind of tough. Um, the inspection crew was very competent. One veterinarian with 6 inspectors. The veterinarian had a lot of experience in India and Africa, where he'd worked on lines where TB cow was just a normal course of business in the plant. So yeah, very friendly guy that understood the gravity of what he was up against, but also I had some confidence he knew what he was doing. Yeah, 2 of the inspectors lived in Medicine Hat, and they stopped at the farm on the way. Um, you have to seal the trailer when these cows are being moved to the plant. Uh, just yeah, one more regulatory rule. And then when we were unloading them at the plant, the veterinarian saw the trailer at the plant on his way into town. He stopped to visit. Um, uh, Shook my hand, told me he was glad I was coming. He said, CFI tries to be transparent, and so it's good that I'm going to be there. And he said, wishes everybody would come for it. On yeah, the next morning, I'm not really sure why I went home and drove back about an hour and a half each way because I really didn't sleep anyway. But once the same veterinarian, he really went through explaining what samples they were after and what they were looking for. Um, it's primarily lymph nodes that they're after. Some of them are larger, the ones in the chest and whatnot. Some of them that are in the cheeks of the cows are quite small, about the size of a kidney bean. I mean, I watched these things come out that day, but I'd be hard pressed to think to find them at this point. Yeah, we got all the cows knocked down. We had 2 that had small liver abscesses, and one had a little lower lung lesion. So those 3 carcasses were held. Uh, the remaining carcasses were eligible for sale for human consumption the next day. There was no hold on them whatsoever, even though there was samples pulled from every single one that went on for lab work. Samples go to Ottawa to test. The histology is the first step, which is just microscope work to try to find to identify the TB bug. We started getting negative results back in about 5 days. And the first results come back on the 3 cows that had the lesions. So that was, a bit of a relief. You would think anything that is going to be positive, you would expect lesions. Um, so then we kept getting a few negative results every day or two until we got to the very last cow, at which I got a call that this cow was positive, either for Johne's or TB. Genetically, Johne's and TB are they're siblings. They're very, very close. You cannot differentiate between the 2 with a microscope. So then these samples go on for PCR genetic testing. And yeah, November 14th, my case officer, which that's the only person you talk to when you're involved in these things about any questions of decisions and policy. Um, and they, through the course of this thing, I think I went through 3 or 4 case officers. I don't know if I was just too miserable and they kept giving me to somebody else, but how it went, I thought, I had a good relationship with them. I always called them my parole officer because, quite frankly, I did feel like I was in jail. Um, but yeah, November 14th, I was on a cattle trip uh, east to North Battleford, and yeah, got the call that we was negative. That this cow that either had TB or Yoni's had Yoni's, and she was negative TB. So that's a fairly intense emotion. Um, to reflect on what I learned and through this experience, I guess the first, or something that really stuck out is that, the CFIA people are not all evil. Uh, every boots on the ground person that was out here I had no issue with whatsoever. Uh, and in different environment, I'd enjoy visiting with pretty well all of these people. Um, trade is absolutely crucial to the Canadian beef business when we export such a large portion of what we produce. If we don't trade, we have a dysfunctional market. Um, this process of testing is incredibly expensive. And I guess I do question if we're spending resources, on a public scale in a manner that, maximizes human and animal health outcomes. You know, our operation kills cattle every week of the year in a federally inspected plant. Every one of those animals is looked at by inspectors. Any lesions, any suspect lesion is going to be sent for lab work. To me, I thought that probably should have been good enough surveillance. Uh, in much of the period of after these cattle arrived at our place, we'd been doing the BSE postmortems where veterinarian were taking the dead cows apart. Same thing. If they seen lesions, uh, that would have raised some flags. But the decision was to test, so you don't have a lot of choice but to cooperate. Um, we probably tested in the best time of the production cycle where we could wean the calves at the same time as we did this testing. Um, and there is a rule that if the calves aren't 6 months old, you don't have to test them. We calved late, so that was no issue. But I know people that have had to, through this ordeal, I've certainly sought and found others that have been through it. And I know people that tested pairs in the spring. I mean, that's an absolute shit show to have to pull the calves off for the initial injection, put the calves back on, and then 3 days later pull the calves off again for the palpating, and then uh, the reactors when the cow's a reactor and she's got a sucking calf. Uh, in that case, they just euthanize the calves as well. Uh, that's kind of a mess. Um, heavy pregnant cows, that wouldn't be a good deal either to be, knocking through, last trimester cows, 2 trips through the chute is going to have more of an impact as well. And then, cash flow. If and both the previous speakers talked about quarantine situations. So, clearly that means you can't sell. So in our situation, we normally always backgrounded our calves anyway. But if we were a highly leveraged outfit that was, set up our payments around a payday at weaning, and you can't sell the calves. And, if it was more of a traditional cow-calf outfit and you don't even have the capacity to background the calves, you got bigger problems. Uh, I guess the other one is I always thought of TB as a, raging contagious disease. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. Clearly, it's not. Uh, if it was, the whatever index herds that have identified a positive would have a very high infection rate. And in reality, if you look at the numbers on the CFIA website of how many positives were found on these index herds, I mean, in the Jenner case, I think they knocked down close to 15,000 cows and they found 6 positives. So I think it's a lot harder to get this disease than we typically think of. The testing process is horrifically slow. I mean, back to how contagious this is, I told the CFIA people that if this thing was contagious at all, this testing process is kind of like, chasing a white-tailed deer with a turtle. You're not going to catch it. So a 5-year trace out is the rule from an index herd. I just shudder to think if we would have had a positive. I don't think it's a stretch to say that in the previous 5 years, we've probably acquired cattle from close to half the herds in Western Canada. Clearly, there isn't the resources available to test that many cattle and put that many outfits under quarantine. There'd have to be a policy change if that happened. And I mean, our outfit isn't the only one that's playing this cow game the way we are. Closed herd, I mean, that's certainly the biosecurity message, but if there is somebody with a closed herd, I don't know them and haven't seen them and would be interested. Like, truly to be a true closed herd means you don't buy any bulls, you don't share any fence lines, you never buy a bottle calf. That's a very difficult thing to accomplish. The other thing that crossed my mind through this is learning more about yonis as well. Because it's so linked to TB, and then we certainly heard of links between yonis and Crohn's in human, and if you want to get scared, just think about if that link was more firmly established, where there was a mandate to eradicate yonis. And I mean, you hear different numbers, but I think it's fairly well accepted that likely 3/4 of our Western Canadian herds have some yonis in. That would be very difficult to test and remove. CFIA is obligated to compensate for the reactors that are killed in these situations. We just actually got paid for them likely a month ago. The compensation on the cows they actually knocked down is fair, but you get absolutely nothing for the business interruption, labor, feed, lost grazing. All of that is just gone. I mean, if I would have been given the choice to go out and just shoot 26 cows and have this over, I just would have pulled the trigger. The costs that are non-cattle are far in excess of the cattle. I found that to be quite offensive, and I just couldn't grasp that that's what the law is. However, clearly that's wrote right into legislation. I have a very experienced friend lawyer that's worked a lot with CFIA cases, and his advice to me was don't waste your money. He said you'll never win, and so we just sucked it up and got through it. And our quarantine is fully lifted now, and we carried on. I think both Karen and Kevin also talked about mental health situations and implications, and I can say that they're real. I probably try to sell myself as a tough guy cowboy, but I've sent thousands of cattle to slaughter, euthanized lots of chronics, did emergency slaughters on the farm. None of that really bothered me at all, but loading up bred cows to take to slaughter just only motivated by testing, that actually hit me pretty hard. And throughout this whole thing, the thought of having a positive, would have meant that our entire herd would have had to been, when, the euphemism is depopulated, but, the reality is that you kill all your cows and calves. We wean 4-weight calves. I couldn't really grasp, putting 20 of them in an alley at a time and putting a big clip in a 22 and laying them all down. That just, yeah, I told my case officer, parole officer, if it comes to that, I said, be forewarned, I want you to get some great big burly guys out here, put me in a straight jacket and drop me off at the nut house. Uh, from the time you get the initial contact until you finally get released from quarantine, you have a heavy weight of thinking about how could be affecting your neighbors, because anybody that's got fence line is going to end up having to test. Anybody within that proximity is going to test. And in our reality, anybody that we bought from, whether we buy some cattle direct, we buy primarily through markets, but especially in central Alberta, if you're selling your cows at a market, there's a very good chance that we've owned at least one of them in the last 5 years. Those people would all be obligated to test under the current rules. That's kind of scary. I feel really fortunate that I had my wife and a few good friends that kept telling me that the sun would keep coming up and we'd persevere, regardless of the outcome. You kind of need that. You really do. I'm passionate about cattle. That's been my entire career, but yet I buy and sell and trade so many of them. They very much become a commodity. I I'm very concerned about animal welfare, but yet decisions whether or not we're going to breed or sell or slaughter, or I don't attach any emotions to sending cows to slaughter when it's my idea. It's very different when it's somebody else's idea. I do have a lot of contacts in the business that have a very different model of their cows, uh, smaller. They know all the cows. They have basically their relationship with them to some extent. I couldn't imagine telling some of my neighbors that fit into that category that you were even going to test and kill their reactors, let alone knock their whole herd down. So that's my jury story. We want to talk about that a little bit, and then I'll try talking about liner rollovers next if anybody has any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, Naomi says, thank you. All very informative, great presentations. Are there any questions? So Beaver Emergency Service had to leave due to another meeting. So now, like going forward, there will be only questions for Karen and Brent, and they did leave their email. If anybody was not able to ask them questions, they can always send them an email. Okay. Thank you for advertising today's presentation, which I learned from. Appreciate honest of Brent Decker personal experience with the TB trace out. Okay, Brent, somebody is thanking you and they really appreciate your presentation.
There's not that many people that speak out about these kinds of experiences, and I
Yeah.
think it's very valuable in terms of having a producer network to lean on of people that have gone before you, and you don't know who's gone before you if no one ever talks about it. So thanks, Brent. I appreciate that as well. And we had conversations kind of all the way through, right? But I think, yeah, it very much helps.
When you get the call Karen first on this. I mean, her role is kind of coaching you through these things, and she does it exceedingly well.
Okay, are there no questions? Interesting. I guess your guys' presentations were like pretty spot on. People are all thanking, but nobody's asking questions. Is there anything else you guys want to add on? Brent and Karen? Brent, is there anything else you want to add on?
Yeah, I guess with regards to how quiet or how public to go with this, I mean, we've got quite a few staff and and this is a multi-day thing and there's CFIA trucks parked at the hotel in town, like, to say that it was we really didn't have a choice about keeping this thing quiet. The story would have broke anyway. Uh, if you got 100 cows and you can get the CFIA trucks in the dark and park them behind the barn and not have any neighbors over to help you, you probably could keep this quiet. And obviously many people have. And, I can respect wanting to do that as well. But I think you also have to remember, if you've been tested, you should be the cleanest guy in town.
Yeah, and I think the other point too about all of the costs, all of the costs that are associated that you wouldn't have gone through otherwise. That's a real sticking point for me as well. It makes no sense the way the legislation was written. It makes no sense that there's no standing programs to apply to. It makes no sense.
There's
So.
nowhere else in the law where an entity can come on your operation and obligate you to spend with no recourse.
Yeah.
No
And like
recourse
insurance
whatsoever.
policies exclude like foreign animal disease, right? So you can't even like even if you wanted to put insurance on your farm policy for something like that, you absolutely can't.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like so I think there's definitely some room for advocacy. That's I guess part of ABP and CCA's job is to try and get some of that that fixed. It's a very slow process, I will tell you that. But
Perfect.
Yeah, Karen is attempting through Agra Recovery to get some compensation. I understand the logistical challenge of how do you value what it costs somebody, because it's going to be different for everybody. And I mean, my suggestion would be that you just come up with a dollars per head. But, to say that, this thing is going to be in, it's not a few dollars a head. I would expect the true cost of it is in the hundreds of dollars
I would
per head.
agree. Looking at the cost data I've been able to gather to date.
Yeah, and it really depends on when you test. Probably the ideal day to test would be the day that you would otherwise normally plan to wean. I mean, we were going early on that, but still not as bad as the guy that has to test pairs. That would be a, not
Nightmare.
only, yeah, and typically that's going to be when your bulls are out as well, so you're going to mess up conception for next year. There is no good time to do this, but I would argue that kind of the day that your calves are 5.7 months old would be ideal, so that you didn't have to test the calves and you could do it basically at weaning, so you didn't have to mother those calves back on and then pull them again. But yeah, like in our situation, we left really good grass that there was very little, like we trucked a lot of the cows home. There was no point in hauling them back when you're testing we had combines running still when we're testing. It's quite a calamity to say the least.
Well, and I think depending on when your herd is identified too, they will try and work with you on testing dates. And especially like lower risk herds. So trace outs are a bit higher, but like the trace ins, they might even like if they identify you and you're calving, they might wait till the fall, right? So there sometimes is a bit of flexibility, but it kind of depends on your herd risk level and when you get identified in the process.
And often you're going to be under quarantine until you test. So that's
for a trace out. Trace ins are different For the trace-ins, the quarantine gets applied the day of testing.
Yeah. So Brent, Nicole says, thank you for openly sharing, Brent. It is nice to hear a producer experience and make a person think about how detrimental the situation can be. Are there any questions? Is there anything else you want to conclude? Like last things, I think there's no questions. Like people are thanking, and I
Yeah,
guess
no,
your guys'
that's all
presentation
good.
was
Do you want me to give my little spiel about tipping trucks
yeah,
over?
yeah. That would be awesome. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I've had the unfortunate experience of being at four-liner rollovers. I am zero authority on this. Kevin would have been the guy today that would be, have the rules, but I can just share some of my learnings from being a part of this. Yeah, three of the wrecks that we were at were our own cattle, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately not our trucks. And the fourth one was a colleagues of mine's cattle that rolled on 599 about a dozen miles from our farm. In all situations, I think you really got to worry about the people first. Like the first one I got to, there was a fire department. The first one happened on Highway 36 at the correction line south of Castor. Fat cattle that had left our farm on their way to Brooks. This is probably almost 25 years ago. Horrid, stormy weather. And the guy didn't hold her on the road on the corner. Flopped it on its side. The driver had called it in. At that time, there was none of these livestock trailers in existence. Uh, you know, uh, you have to have a way to contain the cattle. Don't be letting them out of the truck in a storm so they can go out on the road and somebody can run into them and hurt more people. My speculation is that, most of your deaths and injuries on that truck are going to happen in the first half an hour, and you're never ever going to get onto that truck before then. So, as distasteful and disgusting as it is to see this load of distressed cattle laying on its side, leave it alone until you got containment, which is typically going to mean panels. In the case of this one south of Castor, I I loaded a stock trailer full of panels at the farm and took a firearm and headed down there. The fire crew was already there. They were happy that I showed up and cooperative, but I can honestly say I'm pretty sure that they would have opened that trailer without containment if I hadn't have got there with the panels. These response trailers are a very good resource to have. If farmers lean on farmers, that's what we keep hearing, and so finding somebody local that's got some. I mean, the panels that the livestock trailer have are they're fairly light. They having somebody that can show up with even half a dozen big freestanding panels is really helpful. In the case south of Castor, we were able to figure out who owned the adjacent land. It was pasture land. We sent a pickup around the outside to check the fence. We cut the fence and we ran panels from the trailer to the fence. We let these animals into the pasture. The assumption myself, and I think everybody has when you get that trailer open, which typically, I don't think they'd ever come to rest on their roof. They typically come to rest on their side, and they usually go over on their right side because, just the nature of us driving on the right side of the road. So when anybody familiar with these trailers, when they go over on their right side, the cattle, if it's mature cattle, the nose is not going to be decked. So the cattle that were in the nose are going to have more room than they had when it was right side up. So long as one of them didn't have a foot out that punch side floor before or the punch side on the side of the trailer before before the trailer came to rest, the ones in the nose, in all cases that I've been involved in, have been just fine. They got lots of space. They're standing there looking at you. The animals on the decks, the decks are 8.5 feet wide when it's right side up, and when it flops on its side, they're just shy of 6 feet. So you took away a quarter of their space. So they're tight as hell, but um, on the assumption the cattle weren't loaded overly tight to start with, they're still got a pretty good chance. The cattle in the doghouse, they're down to, I think, a touch under 5 feet of wall space that becomes the floor when it's laying on its side. And if the doghouse was flipped down, then you're taking, for the back half of the doghouse, you're taking 8.5 feet of floor space and putting it into 4.5 feet. And the front part of the doghouse, you're taking 4 feet and putting your 4.5 feet and putting it into 4.5 feet. So the doghouse cattle are in trouble. And then the very worst place to be if you're a cow in a flopped over trailer is in the back of the trailer where it was they had 8.5 feet, and that whole area goes down to 4.5 feet. Those cattle are in big trouble because there literally isn't enough room for them. So they're piled there. It's disgusting. I seen a steer that was basically in there nose first, suffocated clearly, not pretty. The most recent one I was at, this load of calves about 12 miles away. One of the county guys called me to ask if I could head up there with ask if we had a portable chute, and I said, "Oh yeah, we have more than one." But I said that's really not what you need. I would strongly advise in just about all situations, don't try to load them into another liner out of a makeshift facility. Get some stock trailers. Every farmer has one. I went up there again with a trailer and a gooseneck, 20-foot gooseneck, and a firearm. I think it's important when you're on the ground in these situations. Typically, the fire crews, emergency responders are going to be appreciative of, knowledgeable stockmen that know how to handle the cattle. The assumption that, as soon as that trailer is open, these cattle are going to come roaring out of it if they're able-bodied is wrong. When you open that trailer, these cattle are exhausted and they quit. They think they're beat. Like I've seen, mature animals that are just fine that, it takes some convincing to get them to move. So you kind of need somebody that can read that situation. Like once you have the door open, with the calves, they kind of get all tangled up, and you need somebody that's comfortable to enter that trailer and basically untangle and read the play and get out of there before if there is something that's going to be aggressive. That load of 5-weight calves, I kind of just went in there and untangled them. Firemen, I'd call for a rope when I needed, to pull on a leg or whatever to untangle them. I think you got to be wary in this situation. You should behave in a way that if you were just keep it in your mind, just think that somebody's filming you the whole time and be willing to defend how you acted. It's against the law to drag a live animal. I mean, clearly you have to use some discretion, but you definitely don't want to be pulling out animals with a loader and having a live animal hang, and you don't know what the traffic. Everybody's got a camera in their pocket. Let's act in a responsible manner to be as kind to these animals as you can. They've already been through hell. In every situation I've been at, there's been cattle that needed euthanized. In two situations, RCMP were on the scene. In both cases, I asked them if they wanted me to look after that, and both cases they said no. In both cases, they shot animals without killing them, and very quickly turned it over and asked me if I would deal with that. So there's a skill set in shooting a cow. It doesn't have that big of a brain. You kind of got to know where it's at. By code of practice, a 22 rifle is not allowed, is not a sufficient weapon to kill a mature beast. A fresh weaned calf, it's fine, but my weapon of choice is 410 shotgun slugs. We use them, to clean the chronic pen up in the feed yard all the time, and definitely in these cases, it's especially if it's mature animals, it's good. It doesn't have a lot of range. It's got a soft lead shell that has got less ricochet chance, and it's very, very effective. So you're going to have deads, and I think it's important to be wary of the public perception of that. Just get them out of sight. It's very few places are you going to flop a truck where there isn't somebody with a loader tractor within a couple miles. And call the rendering outfit to come and get the carcasses. And, let's, we don't have to hide from the truth. The truth is that there was a wreck and there was dead cattle. But having a pile of corpses beside the highway is not ideal. Insurance in the cases that we had has been no issue. They never asked for pictures. They just, got a record of how many animals were on the shipment, what we paid for them, and they reimbursed the dead ones at cost. And they actually bought the insurance company reimbursed the entire load, and then they offered you the live ones back at a discount. But yeah, going back to don't try to load them into a liner, stock trailer them to somebody that's willing to take them. We just heard about all this biosecurity stuff. The ideal place to go with them is going to be an auction market or a feed yard, somebody that doesn't have a strong biosecurity wall. And obviously they have to be a willing participant. It's probably a good idea to take pictures of all the deads, if in case insurance does want some proof. And yeah, that's kind of my very unofficial, unorthodox, unofficial experiences with dealing with a load of dead cattle, or not a load of dead, but a flopped over load of cattle. I've handled a lot of cattle in a lot of situations, and 4 of these situations to date, and yeah, certainly if the phone rings, I'm not going to hesitate to go and help out. I was in one situation where there was 2 fire departments there, and the one fire department told me I was uninsured hazard to get out of there, and the other guy said, "You're nuts." I thought they was going to. In any case, after some harsh words, the decision was made that I should stay, and so I guess you have to be aware of that. I mean, ultimately, it's you're not the guy in charge. If you're the farmer that shows up, you're the resource person for the first responders.
Perfect.
Yeah, better just, keep them wheels side down is a way better program. But, the reality in our industry is that these cattle have to roll. I mean, we've sent fat cattle out of this yard in some absolutely horrific situations. And fortunately, with our own trucks, everybody's always kept them wheels down.
Perfect. Thank you, Brent, for sharing your story with us. This is the last 5 minutes. We will be doing any Q&A. If you have any questions, please feel to type it. Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of questions coming in today. A lot of people doing comments, but no questions. I guess you both have done an amazing job with both of your presentations, and thank you, Brent, for sharing that story with us. Okay, is there anything else? Karen, do you want to add on?
No, I can't speak to direct experience in rollovers, but I do know that it is really handy to have someone who knows what they're doing on site. Opening the trailer too early is usually a bad thing. And just to try and have that containment and a little bit away from the public eye if you can.
Perfect.
And these
I do have a
trailers that are available, I think most counties have them. Like
Yeah.
I know the fire department has one that's kept right in their firehouse in town. They're set up pretty good actually. Like the panels they have aren't super heavy, but it's sure better than no panels. And yeah, they've got ropes, they've got
Saws, they've got all sorts of stuff.
oh yeah. Capstan went like a circular, like a skill saw that's designed to cut metal is the most effective way to cut the trailer. They have that. They've got generators. They there was a lot of thought put into equipping them.
Perfect. I do have a quick announcement I wanted to make before some people have already started leaving the webinar. We have our AGM on March 26th. If you have not registered for it yet, please do register it. It's in Hellcraig Community Hall at 10 a.m. And this year's theme is 4 hours on fertility management. We do have a lot of speakers coming in for that. It's a free workshop, and our AGM is together with that. Feel free to register, or you can always give me a call. Okay, I guess I will conclude the webinar. There's no more questions. Thank you all for coming. And thank you for everyone who joined in. We know everybody's busy and we really appreciate taking the time to be here. That brings an end to our today's webinar. We hope you found it informative and worthwhile. If you have any feedbacks or suggestions for the future webinars, please please don't hesitate to reach out. We're always looking for new ideas and that are useful for producers. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you at our AGM. Thank you. Thank you, Brent and Karen, again for coming in.
Thanks for having us.